Minister, I've been raising this issue, the issue of accommodation, with you since the summer, the issue of students paying for unused accommodation, and each time I've raised it with you, you've assured me that at the very least students on on-campus accommodation would get refunds. So can you confirm whether all universities are issuing refunds? And I will come to the issue of private accommodation next. I really want to get this off the table, but what you're telling me here isn't what's happening on the ground. So, thank you.
I want to thank Deputy Conway-Walsh for raising this matter and very much acknowledge that this is an issue that she has indeed rightfully been pursuing for quite a period of time. And the short answer is I have been informed that all universities are now offering refunds in relation to campus-owned accommodation. Now, if the Deputy has, as sometimes she does have, individual cases where that's not the case, if the Deputy would like to bring them to the attention of my office, I'll bring them to the attention of the individual institutions. I am very conscious of the challenges faced by students regarding student accommodation this year, due to both financial pressures, but also to the blended learning format of the 2020-2021 academic year. The Deputy will be aware that the university sector has been actively engaging on these issues and trying to respond to a very evolving public health situation. My officials, and indeed myself, have liaised with the Irish University Association on this matter, and I have been assured that all universities have confirmed that students who opted to leave their university-owned student accommodation as a result of reduced on-campus activity will be offered refunds. The processing of these refunds is a matter for the university themselves, and any student who wishes to receive a refund for their on-campus accommodation should engage directly with their university's accommodation office. I will continue to liaise with the sector to ensure the availability of fair solutions to students. I know you'll come to the issue of privately owned accommodation in a moment as well. I would point out, though, and I don't have the figures available to me here, but from my memory, I think there are about 7,000 students who have still chosen to live in student accommodation for a variety of different reasons, including perhaps not having maybe access to the facilities at home that they may require, or attending practical classes, or wanting to avail of libraries. So I'm not suggesting you're saying this, but there are a number of students who have decided for a variety of reasons that they do wish to remain in student-owned accommodation.
Yes, there are, Minister, and indeed my son is one of those in the accommodation in Trinity, and that's not what I'm disputing. But it's not good enough that public institutions have refused to give refunds or only partial refunds, and many have tried to give the smallest refunds possible. I've received recent reports that some universities, DCU being one of them, are refusing to give refunds unless requested by the 5th of October, 2 weeks before the Level 5 restrictions were even announced. Other universities, Limerick University, are only issuing refunds for the 6 weeks of Level 5 restrictions. Universities were instructed to move online to Level 3 restrictions at the end of December. The refund for unused accommodation should be for the entire semester. So they might be saying to you that they are, but really they're not being upfront about this, Minister, and I'd ask you to have another look at it, and I certainly will give you cases where this has happened to people.
Minister.
I want to thank the Deputy, and I certainly will pursue the two specific issues that she's raised and any individual cases that she wants to bring to my attention. My view on this matter is the same as her own in relation to publicly owned or college-owned accommodation. The refunds should be provided. In fairness to our universities, I understand it's been a very challenging year for them, but it's been an extremely challenging year for their students, and they need to be as flexible as they possibly can in that regard, and the Higher Education Authority is there to assist them. Ultimately, though, we do need to build an awful lot more student accommodation. Just to give you some figures, we have a target of having 21,000 additional purpose-built student accommodation by 2024, so space for 21,000 more students, because I am concerned, and I've said this to you before at the Oireachtas Committee, that we are too reliant on the private market for student accommodation, and we're also nearly pitting students against families or working professionals for limited accommodation, particularly in our city. So I would be very interested in working with this House, working with the Oireachtas Committee, to make sure that we fulfil the commitments in Rebuilding Ireland, which is to have 21,000 additional places for students in purpose-built accommodation by 2024.
Minister, as you said, most students are not on campus accommodation, they're in the private sector, and private student accommodation has been the preferred model indeed for successive governments. But when I raised the issue with private accommodation over the past couple of months, you've said that there isn't a lot you can do. I really think that, and I want to commend the private accommodation providers who have have issued refunds, but there's many of them who haven't, and I think they need to be called out. I really think that they do. I've spoken to the universities about this myself as well, and I want them to be aware of this so that they can take them off their lists. They really need to take those ones that have exploited students off their list so that students in the coming years won't avail of that accommodation. Telling students and families what they want to hear doesn't help them in any way. They need a government that's willing to stand up for the Minister, and really there are many families pushed into poverty because what is happening with student accommodation refunds as
Minister,
it is.
to conclude.
So as the Deputy and I have discussed before, I have tried to provide a variety of ways of assisting students financially and their families within the ambit of resources and levers available to me. I do agree with the point, though, that any student accommodation provider who isn't acting reasonably, that won't be forgotten, no doubt, by students and their families. And I think people should reflect very much on that. I did come across figures the other day that does show in Ireland, unlike other countries, about 38% of our students remain living at home during their time in college, around 19% in student accommodation, purpose-built student accommodation, and the remainder in private accommodation. I'd like to see a significant increase in purpose-built, college-owned accommodation. I think we need to find a solution for our technological universities. The largest university in our country is TU Dublin, and yet technological universities at the moment don't have a mechanism whereby to build their own student accommodation, and I intend to work with government colleagues to try and find a solution to that.